Death or Prison, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. Let's join John Branham, Elmo Golden, and Raul Lopez in part one of their discussion with the shot caller, Casey Diaz.
Hello and welcome to the Death or Prison podcast brought to you by leanonmeusa.org, where we invite you to click the podcast button where you can connect with a welcoming mentoring church near you. Today I have to my right Mr. Raul Lopez, and to my left, Mr. Elmo Big Mo Golden.
All right.
I am Johnny Branham, and today we are talking with our distinguished guest, Mr. Casey Diaz, who is also the author of the book entitled The Shot Caller. Casey, how you doing today, man?
Yeah, man, it's a good day. Any day out here is a good day, right?
That's right. That's it.
That's right.
Definitely got that right. Absolutely. And so, Casey, we want to start out talking about, your early life. And I know Raul has some questions to start bringing that up.
Yeah, first things first, Casey, it's an honor and a privilege, my brother, to be talking to you. So many things we all have in common. And I just wanted to know, I was reading part of your book and looking at the interviews. You came from Salvador at an early age. What age did you come over to the States?
I was brought here by my parents at the age of 2.
And what part of the United States did you come to?
Came to Southern California, in particular the Rampart District.
Not too far from South Central, yeah. Yeah. And Casey, looking at your background, even before you got to the United States, I know that the country of Salvador was going through a lot of stress, a lot of political mayhem. The violence was already very rampant in Salvador, just part of your culture, really, when you came over here.
Yeah, there were in the beginning stages of what would become a civil war in El Salvador. In fact, my grandfather on my father's side was in the military there, and he ended up him and his wife were executed in front of their children. So my father, got to see that part, and I think it definitely had something to do with who he became in life later on in his childhood and adulthood.
I remember you making the statement that your father was very violent, very verbally abusive, violently abusive with you and your mom.
Yeah, it was more violently abusive towards her, physically assaulting her. With me, it was more verbal, more emotional. He had a way of making you feel less than. I mean, that was just his character and how he carried himself for a very long time.
Right. The reason why I ask that, because there's usually a root to a problem. How did you feel, by the way, at such an early age, seeing constantly your mother abused? It sounds like a redundant question. It might seem foolish. Well, how would you think you would feel? But from the perspective of a small child, how did that affect you?
Well, it definitely did something to my psyche, as far as, I knew that very early on that there had to be something wrong because I really just disliked coming home because obviously I knew that at any point my mom would be walking in from a long day of work. And she was the responsible party. I mean, she was the one that, provided. She was the one that did the comforting. She's the one that put, a roof over her head. And at any given time, he would walk in late at night. And so here's this lady, your mom, and she's only, she's short of 5 feet. And having pulled, some outrageous amount of hours at work, going to 2 jobs. And then you come home and you see her getting beat. You see her getting beat as a man would beat another man. That really it did a number on me. It definitely did a number on me. I think it contributed somewhat to, and I'll touch base on that later on in the interview, but it definitely did something inside of me to look at life like a little bit different than the average kid, I would say.
Definitely. I can relate. I can't really say my father was physically abusive, but very verbally abusive. But something happened when I was 4 years old that was sexually abused, and that created such anger, and that's why a lot of the violence in my life. So I could definitely relate, and the anger and the resentment. Is your father still living? Your mom?
I'm not going to answer that, and the only reason is because we're actually in the works of another a second book that has to do with the Shot Caller series.
Okay,
so
I understand.
I want my readers to, I'm gonna
Sure.
hold everybody on the cliff there.
And for the listeners that really might not understand, I know in California it has a 100-point system. That's how they evaluate and they determine security based on the violence. And you scored at a 97, didn't you?
I did, and unfortunately, it's something that you when you're doing these acts of violence out on the streets, you're not thinking. I mean, and I'll speak for myself. I just, you did what you did as a gang member, and when you're walking into a leadership position, you just don't show the emotion, and even if there was emotion, you just don't show that. But for me, it was just, I didn't have concern for life. I didn't have concern for, property, for things. To me, it was, get it, and that's it. I mean, so. What
really would you say was the predisposing factors for you to actually join a gang? What attracted you? What was the gateway that got you into that?
For me, it was, the sense of belonging, the validation, the sense of, and I'll say this, it's the false sense of family. Because when you're left unsupervised, as I was, and many gang members, I think we all share similar stories as far as LA gang members. We were raised for the majority of our lives in a one-parent system,
right?
And it's unfortunate because that's not how God designed it. But things happen, in my case, there's a father that's there but is brutally violent, and so that really it affects how you think, it affects how you walk. It affects how you deal with problems and how you deal with people in the long run. So I think it's a recipe for disaster when the house is in order. So for me, the gang culture embraced me, and I embraced it. And I think that I found that I didn't think it was a false sense of family at that time, but I found a sense of family, and I think that's what really lured me into getting involved in the gang culture to begin with.
Not even thinking of prison or gangs or anything, our lifestyle. Every human being has a need to be accepted, to belong. We just went to the extreme because of the atmosphere that we were raised in. Like you were saying, a false sense of family. And your father being there, it was like he wasn't being there. In fact, he was bringing a lot of stress and pain. What was your relationship with your mom back then?
With my mom, we had a great relationship. I mean, I share in the book about, looking forward to Sundays because that's the only day that she did not work. And so,
wow.
My thing with my mom very early on in my age, in my childhood, was going to the laundry with her. And I looked forward to going to the laundry mart, with her, and taking a little basket and all our clothes on a Sunday morning, and we wake up really early in the morning, go to the laundromat and help her out and spend some quality time with her. that's my relationship with my mother was very till this day. I mean, it's a wonderful relationship. I think that a lot of what I've learned on the good side of that was, she was a hard worker, and she showed me that you just don't. She was very, very against handouts and taking anything from the government, assistance or anything like that. She just wasn't having it, And I remember one time in particular when she fell on some hard times because I guess economically something was going on in that particular time, and we did have to get assistance for a very short time. I remember her sitting me down and telling me, "This is not the right thing to do." I mean, and again, I'm like probably 7 years old or 8 years old, and she's telling me this is not how it's supposed to go down.
Interesting.
If there's nothing wrong with your body, then you go out there and you work. I don't know the dynamics or the full story of why we had to get government assistance for that very short time, and it was a very short time. Because right away I remember she would always talked to me as she would talk to an adult. That's one of the things that I had with her. So she sat me down and said, I'm going back to work. We're no longer needing this, and everything's going to be just fine. It's going to be back to normal. And to me, I didn't understand all the ins and out of all that stuff, but I'll never forget. We had so many talks with her, and they were always in an adult form of conversation. She just she didn't spare details. She was just a sharp, straightforward kind of person, and I think that has helped me along my walk now as an adult.
Immensely. That's very interesting. At what age, more or less, did you join the gang?
I was 11 years old when I got introduced to it, and at the same age is when I got jumped in.
You got jumped in. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because a lot of us know what that's all about, but there's a myriad of listeners that really don't know. Jumped in, what does that mean? Who initiated you, and so on?
So in California, in Southern California, gangs do it in two separate ways. One of them is that they choose several gang members to they put you in the middle, and they jump you, they assault you, and they'll either count to 13 seconds or they'll spell out the gang name. And for me, it was the 13-second count, and they just beat you and you fight back as much as you can. And once those 13 seconds are over, or they're done spelling out the gang name, then you're in. You're officially in, and there's handshakes and a few pats on the back, some hugs, and hopefully not too many missing teeth. But
Exactly.
that's how it rolls. I mean, that's how you get jumped in. And I was 11 years old, got jumped in by three individuals. One of them was murdered. The other one committed murder, and the third one got involved in organized crime later on in his life. So, I have an 11 years old son, and he is oblivious to this kind of side of growing up, and I like that. I really like that.
Let me ask you something, Casey. The drugs, how big of a part were they of the gang life at 11 years old when you started?
They're a big part. They're definitely the business side of any organized gang. They did exist. They were there. For me, it wasn't something that was intriguing. I wasn't, it just didn't do nothing for me.
Right.
It didn't. It wasn't attractive to me. I saw what it did to other homeboys of mine, and I just didn't want any part of it. Now, I just want to make sure that people know that I did, I did a taste test of probably everything, but it just wasn't my thing. To me, I didn't see the purpose of it, and it just wasn't my thing. So to me, it was just the violence part of it. That's where I really got involved in the gang culture.
I heard you say that the violence was sort of like your drug, your addiction, really, if you think about it. When did that start? When was your first act of violence? Or because I can imagine with the Rockwood Street Locos, that was an everyday thing.
It was an everyday thing. For me, the first violent crime that I committed was with one of the individuals that jumped me in, that initiated me into this gang. We had stolen a car, and we were just going through alleys, and I remember him going very, very, very fast through these alleys. And, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Los Angeles, but there's alleys everywhere, and we're just flying through these alleys, almost getting some airborne on when you jump from alley to alley. And I thought for a second there, man, we're going to crash, and that's going to be the end of it. And he just, he had just his foot all the way through the gas pedal and flying through this. And then we went to a rival gang territory. It wasn't a rival gang territory at that point, but he had some problems with someone there, and that he wanted to take care of. And we did. We found him. He was by himself. And it was me and this individual, and we jumped him, and he proceeded to stab him, just a lot of times, and then very calmly just handed me that screwdriver and said, your turn. And so my first stabbing was at 11 years old. I mean, it was, I don't know how much damage I did as far as, you're an 11-year-old kid, but.
Right.
I was made to, not made, I guess you could say made, but, you're going to participate, and you're not going to say no to that, So I grabbed the screwdriver, and that was my first real act of violence against another human being.
Did that fella pass away?
No, didn't pass away, but definitely was... It was pretty brutal, and that's what actually made a name for me out there. I always carried one. I always had one in my back pocket. If it wasn't that, it was an ice pick. But that was my choice of weapon there. I didn't like the drive-by shootings very early on. Especially, if you go back in history of the 80s and the 90s, violence of LA gangs. The drive-by shooting was very, it was iconic in there, right? But for me, I saw it as being too easy. I didn't, anybody can get in the car, turn off the lights, and, get a gun or whatever you're going to use to go do a drive-by. So for me, I was one of those guys that was just extreme from the gate. So what I liked doing was walking into somebody's neighborhood, into a rival's gang neighborhood, and chasing them down with a screwdriver in hand, and then doing whatever I needed to do with that individual. I mean, that was I think that's what really put my name up there in the streets of Los Angeles, because that was not normal, And I think that when you start hearing your name out in the streets as that individual, that guy, your ego, your ego stroked, and you want more, and you're just not satisfied with the last one. I mean, it becomes a drug.
It was actually like a badge of honor, and like you say, it feeds your ego, and it's really toxic and sick if you think about it. But that's what we do, and that's where you get to. It seems to me like this started to prepare you for leadership also. Because, as you know, Casey, in the street, the more violent, the more... I once heard, up close, look them in the eyes, that tells you who you are. like you were saying, very simple to shoot from a car, 50 feet away. But when you walk into the neighborhood, get your victim, that's a whole different story. Did you ever have ambitions at an early age? I'm rising to the top. I'm going to be leadership. I guess you wouldn't use the word leadership, but I'm going to be a shot caller.
I did. I thought, and this is again, I think that some individuals are born with a thrive, and if it's not navigated with good leadership, like a father being at home, a responsible father being at home, or a community leader that takes you under a wing that's actually doing something healthy for that community, if that is not in place in a young man's life, in particularly in a ghetto, you're going to that sense of thrive, that desire to get to the top by whatever means, that's going to be used in the wrong direction and for the wrong reasons. And for me, that was I believe strongly that I was born with that, but it was misconstrued and misused. And there was a desire inside of me to, up one on the last thing that I did, and it was just I wanted to get to that penitentiary that everybody talked about. I wanted to make sure that my name was known. Those things. I mean, when you start to think about it, how desperately wicked your heart is. I mean, that it could get very, very vile, very dark, very quick. And for me, it was just the thing to do. So I strived for recognition. I wanted that leadership role, and and it's almost like I would always end up in the circles of older gang members and gang leaders. I was never, even very early on, I mean, I was never in the circles of the gang members that pretty much didn't do anything. Because in every gang, you have gang members that they just dress the part. They look the part, they party, they're there for the girls, they're there for whatever reason. But when it comes to the nitty gritty, like to when the action is happening, they're not nowhere to be found. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So that was
right.
just, it wasn't me. And for whatever reason, these older gang members would, take me under the wing, and I'd end up in these meetings with older gang members. And again, that's another recipe for disaster in any young man's life. I mean, that's really what went down with my life very early on. I think that also contributed to some of the actions that I took, and the way I carried myself, with other gang members, because again, you have that recognition, that pat on the back from an older gang member that he's validating you. He's and he's making sure that everybody knows that they're happy with you. That does something to a young kid very, very fast.
How old was the oldest gang member?
The one that actually.
And the reason I ask is because it's like he's taking a father figure and mentoring an 11-year-old boy.
The gang member in particular that I was talking about, he was I think he was like 15 years old. He wasn't 15, 16 years old. Not that much older, but old enough to be recognized, and he was very violent. So that in a gang is man, that's you're that violent, that young, and you're running in the streets of LA, and your name is being tossed all over the place. That becomes what we would consider a good name on the streets, and
right.
Everybody had a lot of respect for this guy. You're not even thinking of him only being 15 or 16 at that time. An 11-year-old, any 11-year-old, right? We look at someone that's in their 20s, and we go, wow, that's old. So for me, this guy, to me, he was a lot much older in my eyes. And I think a lot of that had to do with how he carried himself there. There was other gang members that were older, but this guy in particular was the one that was putting the name on the streets. I mean, they.
When did you step into a leadership role, and what would you say your role was? What exactly did you do?
Well, there was a moment where there was this gang called 18th Street. The media has put some at that time. They had put them up on their screens and news articles about them in the whole yards. We ended up sharing territory with them. A lot of our gang members had cousins, brothers, fathers, sisters that belonged to that gang. It was a very large gang in LA at that time. But I started going to juvenile hall when I was 11 years old, in and out kind of thing. And I used to see them inside, and I didn't like what I saw. And so very early on, even though we got along with them, I always made it a point to give them trouble. I saw a lot of them, what we call punking out in certain situations where, another gang member from another gang kind of, hovered over them and they would just punk out, and this is juvenile halls. So juvenile halls is a different system here in Los Angeles where, you're still gangbanging just like you would be outside in the streets. There's no really organization in there. You're in and you got to fend for yourself. So I saw them, just punking out and a lot of snitching. And so what I started to dislike is that people made them sound like there were this huge gang that had a lot of power and a lot of strength, and they made it sound like they were very organized. And that became my goal. My goal was, how do I take these dudes down? How do I make them a name for ourselves and a name for me? And so I called a meeting with some of my guys later on, prior to me getting arrested. We'll talk about that later. But I picked up the phone, called one of my real solid dudes that were in my neighborhood, and I tossed the idea and I said, "Hey man, I want to make a move on 18, and I want to make a clique. I want to make a clique that just takes over them. I want to just really do a number on them." And this clique that they had in 18th Street was the Colombia Little Cyclones. You Google that, you're going to find out that was if you were going to be from 18, you wanted to be from that particular clique. And they were down the street from us. We shared our neighborhood with them. We shared quite a bit of landscape there. And maybe about a good, I would say a good 10-mile radius. So we had different cliques, and in this 10-mile radius, we had cliques in where you could actually walk to one of their neighborhood cliques, and you were fine. I mean, we shared a lot of property with them, but they had the older gang members. They had the 30-year-olds, the 40-year-olds, so which made them look like they had it together, And for a young gang member trying to earn stripes, that was perfect for me. It was, let's do this, let's roll on them. So I did this meeting, and I had about 6 or 8 gang members in my apartment where we initially made this meeting. And I remember one gang member in there who he was killed by Rampart Police, LAPD. He was there, and he had 3 brothers that belonged to 18. And I remember when I said this, I said something in the line of we're gonna make a move. This clique is particularly going to make a move on 18th Street, regardless of what everyone else in Rockwood says. we're calling the shot on this, and we're going to move on them, and this is why we're conducting this meeting. And I remember him saying this. He said, kind of with a puzzled look on his face, he says, I got three carnales, meaning three brothers.
Three brothers
from 18. What are we going to do if we run into any of my brothers? And I remember it got really quiet in that room, and I didn't even flinch, man. I said, well, if we run into any of your brothers, we're going to take them out. And that's that. I said, you have a problem with that? Or, you got to let us know right now. And he almost like wanted to say something, but wasn't sure, kind of thing. And unfortunately, two of his brothers were murdered by Rockwood. So, that move right there was pivotal in that culture at that time. And that really boosted my name on the streets. Making that move, everyone in Los Angeles knew that it was me making this call and me making this meeting and this clique, organizing it on the streets. And unfortunately, it became a bloodbath in those 10 miles of that we had there.
Well, I can imagine in Los Angeles, like New York, different cities, you have access. But how did you acquire your weapons? Did you have a person that you go and buy guns or knives or whatever?
Yeah, there was people that that would sell us the guns. There was, obviously burglaries was a big thing. You acquired guns. There was just guns they were very easy to get in Los Angeles. I mean, extremely easy. But for me, I mean, I just, even though my crime was with a firearm, with a shotgun, that was a very isolated incident in which I happened to be having one. But, 9 out of 10 times, all I had was a screwdriver in my back pocket. And that's how I walked the streets and, carried myself.
Right. And it's not that we're glorifying or actually admiring the behavior, but a lot of people don't know. That's why we're getting into some of the details so they can actually understand what goes on. That incident with the shotgun, if you want to walk us through that, what actually happened, and that was right before your arrest or at your arrest, correct?
Yeah, this is what caused my arrest. And again, on this particular occasion, it wasn't like I was actually going out there and looking for trouble. In this particular incident, trouble came and found me. Just happened to be in a little chicken burger joint in Los Angeles, having a meal. And these individuals from 18th Street, back then you were able to ride around in a truck, in the bed of the truck. That was those times. There was no seatbelt laws at that time. I don't think there were.
Right.
But you could ride on the bed of the back of a truck, and trucks were used by gangs a lot. They would fix them up in hauling yards and put wheels and paint them, make them into put hydraulics on them and all that. This one was not one of those trucks. It was just a regular truck that they were using. I don't know if it was stolen or what, but they saw us in this little mama papa restaurant, little hole in the wall, and they came in to jump us. A fight ensued. I happened to have a sawed-off shotgun under a seat in a vehicle outside of this restaurant. I ran to it, and the guy that was chasing me was with it was a crowbar to take off wheels, but it was a very heavy one. It was a very thick metal one. It wasn't like your cheap Pep Boys ones. This was like an old school tire iron kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I get to the vehicle, and it was already loaded. It was a one shot shotgun. Had a little hammer. It split in two. It was already put together under the seat. I reached in to get it, and when I turned around, he was launching at me, about to hit me with that instrument, and I fired. And the first shot was what killed him. He was shot in the face.
Yeah.
When somebody gets shot from that close range, it's how do you say it, man? It's something that you wish you could erase and unwind the clock and start all over, kind of thing. For him, for my victim, he fell outside of the car door. I got out of the car, and I had shells in my pocket, and I proceeded to and I put 4 more shells into that shotgun, and then and shot him an extra 4 times. It was broad daylight. I ran. It was down the street from a school within blocks. I ran, and then I was able to avoid arrest for 21 days following that incident.
Maybe I'm mistaken, but I hear the sorrow and the emotion in your voice as you tell this part of the story.
Well, it's something that, again, as a believer, you even though one can say, well, it was another gang member, to me it was a life. It was someone's life. It was a human being, and regardless of the circumstances and how it took place, someone lost a son, and you just don't forget. You don't forget that easy.
But like you say, the transformation occurs, and you realize what you did. And I believe when Christ comes into the picture, your emotions come alive again. Because at a certain point, you was dead emotionally, spiritually.
Yeah, you're so used to the violence that you're desensitized. You're calloused. Your heart is wax cold in those moments. You don't care about life. You don't care. Life is cheap. Life has no value. And unfortunately, it's not until Christ comes into your heart, into anyone's heart. I mean, you don't even have to be a previous gang leader to understand sin. I mean, that's just,
That's right. Thank you for that. Yeah.
You when you become a Christian, you really, when you look back at those moments, it's hard to describe because there is that remorse that now is in your heart. It's an awful thing to live with. Even though you're forgiven, even though you know all that, and I know that I'm forgiven. I know that that
Right.
was on the cross. But we're still in this human flesh, and you just wish you would have did something different. You wish, for me, I wish I would have never got involved in
Exactly.
a life of crime and a life of gangs. I regret it. I really do.
I believe that's why, Casey, that the deeper you go, I really believe that is the higher that God is going to use you. There's a bunch of people out there that maybe I will never reach, or vice versa, that you can reach, that Elmo or Johnny or myself will reach from different circumstances and things that we live through. So the conclusion is that God uses us all for his purpose and his glory.
It's him making all the difference in our lives.
Exactly. Now, how was the arrest when they came and they finally got you?
So I was initially I was housed in one of my homeboys' moms hid me in her apartment for a little while. I also lived in an abandoned apartment, and the arrest took place on Oakwood and Normandy in Los Angeles. It was me and two other gang members of mine. We went to eat at a Chinese food restaurant that had just opened. We went in there. I happened to have two firearms on me with bullets in my pocket. And we were going to throw a party that night. It was a Friday. And so we're going to throw a party. And I had another gang member from a different gang, a gang that got along with us. He came and met me after we ate. And I, for whatever reason, I don't even know why to this day, well, we get spiritual, and I can tell you, now I know why, but, right. For some odd reason, I took those two handguns and I gave it to him. And I said, and I jokingly said, be careful you don't get caught with these. One of them is hot, suggesting that I had just used one, and I don't think I actually even did, but I was joking around with him. I gave it to him, and I gave him the rounds, and he left. He gave me some money, and he said, I'll pick you up tonight, and that was that. So we headed back. It was a very short meeting. It was probably like maybe 5 minutes at the most, I think. And one of my guys jokingly said, there's a helicopter all the way out there. He said, that's for you. And he said that jokingly, and we all laughed. And we proceeded to walk up the hill, northbound on Normandy, headed towards Oakwood. We made a right on Oakwood and sat on the stairs of a apartment building. And it felt like it just happened so fast, where it was just a sea of LAPD crash and homicide detectives there. And the next thing I know, there's a lot of guns pointed at us. And I even contemplated on jumping a wall that was right behind us. And it was just a short thought. And obviously I didn't do that. But I remember they put us all on the floor one by one. And what I found interesting is that, I didn't resist arrest or anything, but they hogtied me and they put me in the back of the cruiser of an unmarked vehicle and drove me to the corner of Normandy and Oakwood, right on the corner. I'm facing a 45. They take me out just like they would take out a suitcase, a gym bag. And still hogtied. They put me on the corner, on the pavement there, on the sidewalk, and I could hear it on their walkie-talkie, on their handheld walkie-talkie, that whoever was, I didn't know at this time, but I would later on find out in the case that it was a teacher that saw the whole entire thing happen at the crime scene, and she just so happened to spot me walking down the hill, going to this Chinese food restaurant, and I guess pulled over and made that 911 call. To the police.
And made the call.
So that is how that took place, and she ID'd me, and that was a wrap. That was it. That was the beginning of.
You're listening to the Death or Prison podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org, where you can click the podcast button and it will connect you to a welcoming, mentoring church near you. I want to let the listeners know this is not it. You want to tune in next week, because we'll be following up with Casey over the next couple of weeks to finish up this story. It is phenomenal. But Casey, if you're speaking to some youth today that may be thinking about getting into a gang or maybe in a gang right now, what would you say in just maybe a minute or so to them that are thinking about or in a gang?
I would say find something productive to do. Get into some kind of, I would even go as far as, think about joining the military. Do whatever it takes to not join a gang. You're going to waste your time, your life, your young life is going to be spent most likely. And I love the name of your podcast, because that's exactly what's in front of any gang member. It's either a life sentence in prison or death. I mean, that is the prize for any criminal activity out there. And you're young, man. Don't waste your life like that. You're someone. You're valuable to this world, to God. And find a church, find something to do. And for me, I would highly recommend find a youth ministry, find a church, find a mentor. They're out there. There's people that are willing to spend time with you and really guide you in the right direction. It's out there. You just got to look for it.
Yes, and it's definitely right at the other end of that button that I mentioned, Death or Prison Podcast, leanonmeusa.org, where you can click that podcast button. And just as Casey mentioned, you can find a welcoming mentoring church near you. We say it's Death or Prison Podcast, but what do we say each week, fellas?
We choose life.
Amen.
Looking for a welcoming church? Connect at leanonmeusa.org. Be sure to join us next time on Death or Prison for part 2 of our discussion with the shot caller, Casey Diaz. Death or Prison is a production of leanonmeusa.org. Copyright 2020. Death or Prison is offered for information only and is not intended as legal advice. Thank you for listening.
I can change the world. Feed one, teach one boy and girl. Maybe we can change the